Hello, welcome to the Basketball Soapbox. I'm your host, Daniel Daly, and it's been a little while. I've been focusing on the wrestling a little bit here with Brian and Lewis on ring takes, as wrestling has picked up as the past couple of months here. But I'm getting back into the swing of basketball. Of course, there's a bunch of things to talk about, including a lot of stuff happening with the GOAT conversations around the league. Um, this will be episode 58 as we talk about the GOAT point guard conversation, as well as Andre's claim to be the greatest rebounder of all time. And finally, Wild Rashad McCann's takes. Wow. But first, let's get into it here with the GOAT point guard conversation. Between Magic Johnson and Steph Curry. Steph Curry was on Gilbert Arenas' podcast a couple weeks ago, about a month ago, I believe, and basically Gilbert asked him, "Hey, who's the greatest point guard?" And Steph Curry said, "Myself." And when he asked, "So you're the greatest point guard?" Steph Curry replied, "It's between Magic and me, right? We're in the conversation," which is completely correct. I believe those two are the two best point guards of all time. Um, I was battling with Steph Curry because I didn't want to ignore the history of the game, especially with Oscar Robertson and what he did during his time in terms of in the land of big men where everything was ran through the center and stuff like that. Oscar Robertson came in like a bolt of lightning and was able to be so dynamic in all three phases of scoring, passing, and rebounding, and basically, the first person to average a triple double for a season before Russell Westbrook came in 2016 and did it in this era. But what Oscar was doing during that time, I don't want to ignore that and do a disservice by that because Oscar was a dynamo, a doppelganger, just basically just killing the league during that time. And the ability to get 30, 10, and 10 was crazy, but he had that much control on the game and really one of the first trailblazers of the game during that time in the 60s. Eventually winning a title with Kareem Abdul-Jabbar in Milwaukee. Of course, I believe that was 1971. Way later in his career rather than the prime Oscar that we've seen before, that we've seen at that time before. And I didn't want to just gloss over Oscar Robertson and what he's meant to the game. And I'll get into that GOAT conversation. And basically, I'm doing a series on the top 15 players of all time. I'll get into that another time. But um, that ranking has changed. But with these two guys here, talking about these two guys, basically redefining the point guard position in their eras, right? Like Magic is a 6'9" point guard. Think about that. In this era, he'd be a small forward, a power forward, a front court player, basically, operating kind of like a Nikola Jokic. And that was interesting because Isaiah Thomas said that on NBA Open Court when they were talking about You Remind Me, I believe was the episode. And he was basically just saying how would Magic be running a pick and roll offense all the time like that? And everyone on the panel said yes, but he was like, I don't know if he would be able to play that. He would be guarding forwards and stuff like that. And basically, he said he would be operating out of the post and creating from that position the high post and stuff like that. And basically, kind of being like the Nikola Jokic of today, right? When Isaiah Thomas describes Magic Johnson playing today, how he would have been playing in this era, it's kind of like describing how Nikola Jokic would have been playing. So that was very interesting. I suggest everyone go check that out as well. NBA Open Court, I believe it's the You Remind Me of episode. A very good take, and I completely agree with it. I think Magic will be dynamic in this era. But to get back to the original conversation between these two, of course, there's been a whole bunch of debates there. Stephen A. Smith, basically, first take, getting the news from Michael Jordan, texting him saying there's no conversation between this, that Magic is the better point guard of all time. From being a pure point guard perspective, and he said Steph Curry is more of a shooter, changing the game from that perspective and not really a pure point guard. Okay, I can understand that, and different play styles and what we talk about pure point guard leadership and stuff like that. Um, and let's just look at their resumes real quick. Of course, you got Magic Johnson with 3 MVPs, 3 Finals MVPs, 5 chips. Of course, he has 17,707 points. 10,141 assists and 6,559 rebounds. Magic was magic coming into the league day one. And we all know about the early ons in the game against, I believe, the Clippers, where he celebrates with Akeem Olajuwon, and Akeem Olajuwon is definitely different for Magic Johnson from that standpoint and the way that they celebrated, right? And we knew Magic was that guy, especially at Michigan State and all the stuff that he did in college. But in the NBA, he basically changed the position and had a lot of more of centers, forwards, big guys wanting to handle the ball in that league. And you always hear about, especially on NBA Open Court, Steve Smith talking about big point guards and being basically trying to be a point guard, emulating Magic. And a lot of people trying to emulate Magic, and even in that era when people were talking about Michael Jordan and his ascent, people were always saying he's not Magic Johnson, right? So there's always been that comparison to Magic Johnson, like he's the greatest. At one point, was the greatest player of the game, even though I think he was playing with the greatest player of the game at that time. People considered that with Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. So when you look at that standpoint of Magic playing with certain guys and stuff like that, it's a lot easier to facilitate, run the show, especially when you talk about guys with Worthy and Byron Scott running the wing and things of that nature, Jamal Wilkes and Norm Nixon, all these other guys that played with Magic during that time. But you look on the flip side of Steph Curry here, who has 2 MVPs, one Finals MVP that he got against the Celtics, unfortunately. He has 21,000 points, nearly 6,000 assists, and just over 4,000 rebounds, right? And when you talk about Steph Curry's ability to create with his shooting ability, he's obviously the greatest shooter of all time. There's no debating that. There's never going to be a debate with that, with me or anyone else in the history talking hoops. Like, he's the greatest shooter of all time from everywhere. Like, he's that guy from shooting the ball. And when you look at Steph Curry and his team and his Warriors, they won 4 championships. He has a Finals MVP that he's finally earned. He's played with Klay Thompson, Draymond Green, majority of his career. And he's played with Kevin Durant those 2 final runs that they made in 2018, 2019. 2017, 2018, sorry. But so when you look at Steph Curry, and people are going to look at that and take a knock against him. So you've had both these guys who have been basically playing with great players all their careers, right? Like, you talk about Klay Thompson, Hall of Famer, Draymond Green. People argue with that, but Hall of Famer. Kevin Durant, those 2 years, Hall of Famer, no question, Finals MVP. You look at what Magic was playing with Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, Finals MVP. James Worthy, Finals MVP, Hall of Famer, All-Star, multiple-time All-Star. So you just look at the combination of what these guys were able to do for their team, and I think people miss those things that they would do for Steph Curry and say, hey, he doesn't have a Finals MVP at that time, and he didn't have all the Finals MVP. Those went to Andre Iguodala and Kevin Durant and stuff like that. But they don't use that with Magic. And I think Magic, because he was able to win 3 Finals MVPs, able to get those 3 MVPs, be the best player in the league, even though Steph Curry has those as well now, he hasn't done it to the level of Magic Johnson. And I think that's a fair comparison. But I think just in the conversation between these two, we have to respect what they were able to do. And I basically, it's now in this era, basically told create gravity, right? And Charles Barkley said it as well. What defines a great player is the ability to draw the attention of the defense. And when you talk about these two guys, the ability to just orchestrate in different ways, like Magic did it with the ball, correct? Facilitating, running in transition, grabbing the rebound, getting in the fast break, dropping it off to Worthy, dropping it off to Byron Scott, dropping it off to Kareem as the trailer in Showtime Lakers. And in the half court, he would back you down, facilitate, and orchestrate the offense and be able to get the ball to the guys that helped them score. Magic can also score, as we saw the hook shot, unfortunately, I believe in the 1985 NBA Finals, where he hits it over McHale on a broken foot. But you just see the ability of Magic Johnson able to do all of these things and just be a stat guy, like just be able to fill up the stat sheet, I should say. The ability to get triple doubles and dominate from that standpoint. And he creates gravity. That was his gravity with the ball. When you look at Steph Curry, and has been the transcendent player of gravity of this era, his off-ball movement is his best weapon, because, well, I guess the shooting would also add to that off-ball movement. But the off-ball movement creates so much chaos on the defensive end. Do you switch? Do you just chase him around? It opens guys up. We saw this in the playoffs with Andrew Wiggins. We've seen it for years with Klay Thompson, where the defense is so enamored with Steph Curry that they forget about Klay Thompson. They forget about guys like Andrew Wiggins. When he was with Kevin Durant, his movement opened up everything as well. That team was just pure dominance. And when you look at that from that standpoint, with him and Draymond Green, his movement opened up things for Draymond Green to get cuts to the basket, find other guys to hit cutters and stuff like that. So these guys both have tremendous gravity and the ability to draw the attention of the defense, create havoc on the defensive end for teams, even some of the greatest defenses, right? So looking at that point, these guys are both great. They're both legendary, but I'm going to have to go with Magic just from the standpoint of orchestrating the offense and being able to dominate for so long. Like Steph Curry has been able to be dominant for a long time and be a steady presence in this league. Magic Johnson just had, of course, the teammates and stuff like that, which I think people ignore a little bit, but the ability to run that show, the ability to do it over that period of time, the ability to just be dominant and be fill up the stat sheet like that is tremendous. Of course, Magic has the leadership in terms of 5 rings over Steph Curry, finals MVPs. And this is where the comparison of these debates get in, because obviously Curry's the better scorer. I think Magic is the better overall player in terms, and that has a lot to do with size. He's 6'9". He's able to do a couple things that Steph Curry just isn't able to do. But to see how transcendent both of these guys are, where people try to emulate Magic, and now kids all over the world are emulating Steph Curry on the court. They want to shoot threes. They want to do everything on that standpoint, even to the video games where everything is just 3-point operated on 2K, which comes out this week coming up. But when you look at what they've been able to do to the game, is transcend it, evolve it, make it different. And from that standpoint of looking at both these guys, the GOAT conversation, whoever it is, it's your preference, and that's fine. And I'm fine with that. And I think that's a good, healthy conversation as long as it's done in the right way. As we move on here,